Again, good evening, everyone. I'd like to start this meeting by introducing Assistant County Executive Officer Barney Malekian.
Thank you, Gina, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us in this fifth of our 6 community plan area meetings to discuss the application for and issuance of a license in each community plan area for a retail outlet for cannabis. I'm joined tonight by Gina DePinto, who greeted you earlier, by Stephen Yee from the Business Licensing Division of the County Executive Office, and Reese Elistad from the County Executive Office. For Planning and Development, we have Jeff Wilson and Catherine Lair. And our County Counsel tonight is Johanna Hartley. I want to explain briefly what tonight is, and then touch also on what tonight isn't. Tonight, first of all, is an introduction to of your county staff who are involved in this effort and have been involved in it for quite some time. It's an explanation of the applicant selection process, of the business licensing issuance process, the issuance of permits associated with this operation, and an overview of the Eastern Goleta Valley plan area. And a reminder that there's a website down at the bottom, cannabis.countyofsb.org, and you should not jot that down because it will become more significant. We want to give you an overview of the community plan areas I mentioned, and then provide you an opportunity to weigh in, whether you are a potential vendor, or a potential or a resident, or just simply interested in the process. There are several things that tonight is not. It is not the night that we're going to select a vendor, nor is it the night that we are going to select a specific sites. There will not be a specific, a final decision on the scoring sheets, and this is definitely not your only opportunity to weigh in. Subsequent to this meeting, you'll have the ability to email us, any one of us that are on this webinar, or email to the county website through our cannabis link at any time. You can stay connected through the website I just gave you, cannabis.countyofsb.org. There will be a board meeting, a Board of Supervisors meeting on August the 18th, where an overview of these community plan area meetings, as well as final approval of the score sheets, both the business application score sheet and the neighborhood compatibility score sheet, will be made. Then there will undoubtedly be additional meetings related to this prior to final selections. A rough timeline, just so you know, as you can see from the screen in front of you, this is, like as I said, this is the 5th of 6 meetings. Tomorrow night will be the last one. It will be for the Los Alamos Community Plan Area. And then on August 18th is the board meeting. At that time, once the score sheet is finalized, a date where the application period will actually open will be made. And per the ordinance, at least a minimum of 30 days notice prior to the opening, that the announcement of that date has to be made. The scoring window will stay open for 7 days, and after that there will be a scoring process, and that'll be explained here in a few minutes. And then later on, we will return to the board with a report of which applicants were selected. And again, a reminder that the ordinance only allows for 1 retail license per community plan area. This, your community plan area is represented by Supervisor Greg Hart in the 2nd District. He and his staff are listening in to this process and have been following it from the beginning. And with that, I'm going to stop and introduce Stephen Yee.
Before we go to Stephen, I just want to, we've got several people calling in. So I just wanted to let everyone know as we go through this meeting, we will get to a Q&A after the presentation. If you're on a phone, you can raise your hand to let us know that you'd like to speak or ask a question by using *9. It should work that I will be able to unmute you, but just in case, *6 when it's the right time and we call on you. *6 should be able to mute and unmute your phone. In addition, we have the question and answer window option for those who are in Zoom. that you can send us comments and questions. So apologies for the interruption, Barney. I wanted everyone to know that up front, and we will remind everyone again when we get to Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Jana. And now let me turn it over to Stephen Yee from the Business Licensing Division. Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Malekian. Good evening, residents of Santa Barbara County. As Mr. Malekian mentioned, my name is Stephen Yee, and I'm a fiscal and policy analyst representing the county's executive office. I also serve as the coordinator of the county's cannabis business licensing function. The objectives of my presentation today are twofold. One, provide an overview of the county's merit-based cannabis retail storefront selection process, and two, detail the county's cannabis business license application submittal requirements and associated review process. The county's merit-based retail storefront selection process commences with an application that requires the following: an application deposit fee, all requirements as stated in the Business License Ordinance, Chapter 50, except for live scans, a seller's permit, and an issued land use entitlement. A business operations proposal is required, and so is a neighborhood compatibility plan. Upon submittal of the application package, staff will perform the following initial reviews. The county executive office will review the application package and perform a review for overall completeness. And the Planning and Development Department will perform a review to ensure that the proposed operation location is properly zoned. If any portion of the application is incomplete or the proposed location is not properly zoned, a notice of non-acceptance will be issued to the applicant and the application will not move forward for further processing. If the application is deemed complete and properly zoned, the application moves on to the next phase of review and scoring. This second phase consists of a review of the Chapter 50 requirements. This review is conducted by the business licensing team, and the resulting scores are assigned a 25% weighting factor. The second component of this phase is a review of the business operations proposal conducted by a third-party evaluator and is assigned a 75% weighting factor. Aggregate scores of 85% or higher move on to the next phase of review and scoring. Those applicants achieving a score of less than 85% are noticed and will not move forward in the selection process. Phase 3 of the selection process consists of review, scoring, and forced ranking of applications by community plan area. This will be conducted by an internal selection committee on the following two components: Chapter 50 requirements, weighted at 10%, and the neighborhood compatibility plan, weighted at 90%. Applicants achieving the highest score in each community plan area will be allowed the opportunity to apply for a land use entitlement and must also submit a complete cannabis business license application. Next, I'd like to detail the cannabis business license application submittal and review processes so that the public has a thorough understanding of the rigorous requirements and review process that our board has adopted. At a high level, cannabis business licensing allows for an inquiry into the fitness of the proposed entity and all individuals associated with the business, including owners, managers, supervisors, and employees. A business license is required for any person or entity who intends to engage in a commercial cannabis operation in the county. A business license must be obtained prior to commencement of business. However, an exception has been made for those legal non-conforming cultivators who are operating under the state's medicinal laws prior to January of 2016. Further, any person or entity seeking or possessing a cannabis state license must obtain the corresponding county business license. Cannabis business licenses, once issued, are valid for a term of 1 year. A final, unappealable, approved, and issued land use entitlement is required prior to issuance of a business license. For any changes in ownership greater than 10%, a new business license application must be submitted. And finally, cannabis business licenses, once issued, are non-transferable. Per the Cannabis Business License Ordinance, a cannabis business licensing team has been assembled and consists of county departments and one outside agency that have been assigned review responsibilities relating to the review of submitted license applications. The departments that make up the licensing team are as follows: the Agricultural Commissioner's Office, the County Executive Office, County Fire, the Carpinteria Summerlin Fire District, the Environmental Health Services Division of the Public Health Department, Planning and Development, the Sheriff's Office, Sustainability, which is a division of the Community Services Department, and the Treasurer Tax Collector. The application content that operators are required to submit and that which our licensing team reviews is as follows: background and contact information, which includes all applicant and agent names and contact information, the name and contact info for all business owners, managers, supervisors, employees, and persons having a 10% or more financial interest in the entity, a 24-hour contact name and phone number in case of any complaints that need addressing, government-issued ID for all owners, managers, supervisors, and employees to verify that all individuals meet appropriate age requirements, and the entity name, address, and license numbers for all other commercial cannabis operations currently being operated or previously operated by the applicant. We also gather the following information on the operation: a full description of the proposed activities and products, the proposed hours of operations, the total number of employees, the physical address and assessor's parcel number, a property and premise diagram, and evidence of the authority to operate, which consists of either proof of ownership of the premises or, if rented or leased, written permission from the property owner authorizing the tenant or lessee to conduct commercial cannabis activities at the site. And this authorization must be notarized. Additionally, applicants must provide the following state information: copies of the applicant's state licenses or applications, the quantity and type of state licenses that will be required for the proposed operation, a state seller's permit or evidence that the applicant is applying for one, and as previously mentioned, an issued land use entitlement is also required. As for the business entity requirements, the applicant must provide the name and contact information for the business entity, the entity's legal status, and proof of registration with the California Secretary of State. Applicants are also required to submit other supporting documentation, such as a quality control plan. This plan must address procedures on how the applicant will comply with state standards for non-contamination. Additionally, applicants must also submit an inventory control plan to demonstrate the ability to track the location of all cannabis product and be able to reconcile inventories with the records in the track and trace database, which all operators must comply with. There are also requirements that must be met regarding site security plans and background checks. The site security plan elements that applicants must address are as follows: a perimeter security system including fencing, locks, and alarms, motion-activated perimeter exterior lighting, an alarm system maintained by a licensed company with central monitoring capabilities, and a video security system with 24-hour monitoring. Applicants must also identify limited access areas and associated protocols, as well as an employee training plan. And applicants must identify professional security personnel, which is a requirement for all retail storefront licenses. Criminal background checks are required for any individual associated with a cannabis operation. All owners, managers, and supervisors are required to go through a live scan background check conducted by our sheriff's office that discloses no felony convictions. For employees, it is incumbent upon the business entity to perform background checks on all employees and to retain those results. For any individual that successfully passes the background check, the sheriff's office then provides an ID card that must be worn at all times when on site at the cannabis operation location. Again, per the business license ordinance, each department or agency of the licensing team is assigned specific review responsibilities for a given application. Generally, the licensing team reviews the license application and supporting documentation. They also visit the operation location to conduct site inspections. Once each department or agency approves of their review portion of the license review process, the county executive office may provide recommendation of license issuance to the treasurer tax collector's office. The treasurer tax collector then performs a review of the applicant's cannabis tax status, and if no delinquencies exist, may produce and issue the license. Again, once a license is issued, it is valid for 1 year. Per the business license ordinance, a licensed operator must submit a renewal application annually. The review of a renewal license application consists of the following reviews by the licensing team: a review of odor complaints and responses to those complaints in compliance with the county's zoning ordinance, review of the renewal application and supporting documentation, and lastly, site inspections. In addition to the annual renewal requirement and the associated review process, the licensing team performs ongoing compliance checks throughout the term of the license to ensure compliance with the business licensing ordinance. The licensing team has established compliance check schedules to perform these mid-year visits. And finally, per the business license ordinance, county officials and staff may inspect the cannabis operations records, books, accounts, financial data, and any and all data relevant to its licensed activities for the purpose of conducting an audit or an examination. And with that, I'll turn the presentation back over to Mr. Malekian.
Thank you, Stephen. As I hope everyone can see, the process for applying for this license and for obtaining the business license is not a simple process. It is designed to be thorough and to produce the best possible outcome. And now I'd like to introduce you to Catherine Lair from the Planning and Development Department, who will explain about permitting, introduce you to the Planning and Development website, and talk with you about the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan area. Catherine?
Thank you, Mr. Malekian. So hello, my name is Catherine Lair. I'm a supervising planner in the cannabis section of the county's Planning and Development Department. As Mr. Yee noted, any future cannabis storefront retail businesses will need to obtain a land use entitlement through the Planning and Development Department. The next few slides provide an overview on the permit process for potential cannabis retail businesses, where these retail businesses can potentially be located, and what happens after an applicant obtains a permit through the planning department. The county code defines cannabis storefront retail as the retail sale and delivery of cannabis or cannabis products to customers and is referred to as a storefront retailer. A cannabis storefront retailer is required to operate from a licensed premise, which is just a physical location from which all commercial cannabis activities are conducted. And this premise may be closed to the public, and the storefront retailer may also conduct some of these sales by delivery. Next slide, please. Land use permitting is regulated by 3 separate ordinances for the inland, coastal, and Montecito areas of the county. Any future cannabis retailers will be analyzed and processed through one of these ordinances. Storefront cannabis retail in the inland area is allowed in most commercial zone districts, as well as some manufacturing zone districts with the approval of a land use permit. Similarly, in certain mixed-use zone district areas throughout the county, cannabis storefront retailers are also allowed, but with a conditional use permit. I'll provide an overview of the land use and conditional use permit processes in the next slide. Storefront retailers located in the coastal zone of the county require a coastal development permit and are only allowed in commercial zone districts. Finally, the Montecito Land Use and Development Code does not allow for cannabis storefront retail within the Montecito area. Although cannabis storefront retailers can be permitted in all of the aforementioned zone districts, there are other locational criteria that may limit the location of a cannabis storefront retailer. For example, storefront retailers may not be located within 750 feet from schools providing instruction in kindergarten or any grade 1 through 12, daycare centers, or youth centers. I'll provide a more detailed overview of the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan area and highlight zone districts that could potentially allow these retailers in future slides. As previously mentioned, any future cannabis retail business will need to obtain a land use, coastal development, or conditional use permit with the planning department. I'll now provide an overview of the land use and coastal development permit processes. An applicant is first required to meet applicable requirements under the business license review process, after which they can submit a land use application to planning and development. Staff then reviews the project for conformity with all applicable zone district requirements, such as setbacks and parking, as well as for cannabis-specific development standards. Certain applications will need to be reviewed by other county agencies, such as the fire department or environmental health services, and potentially even some external agencies, such as Caltrans. Once an application is deemed complete and all of the analysis is conducted, the project is ready for a decision, and the planning department will notify all property owners and interested parties and residents. The notifications will go from 1,000 feet of the subject property. The mailed notice also includes information on how to appeal a decision. Once the planning department makes a decision on a project, which can be the approval or denial of an application, there is a 10 calendar day appeal period for applicants and/or members of the public to appeal the department's decision. For projects requiring a land use or coastal development permit, the department's general goal is to make a decision within 3 to 6 months. The permit process for a conditional use permit is similar to what I just described, except that for a conditional use permit, a public hearing is required, and the project must also meet additional findings that are focused on ensuring neighborhood compatibility of all of the proposed uses. As detailed in the prior slide, staff will review applications for conformance with all applicable zone district requirements, cannabis development standards, and will obtain required clearances from other agencies as applicable. When the projects that require conditional use permits are ready for public hearing, staff sends notices to all property owners and residents within 1,000 feet of the property, as well as interested parties. Notices for these CUPs include the date of the public hearing and also include information on how an applicant or member of the public can file an appeal. For projects that require a conditional use permit, the department's general goal for making a decision on the project is 6 to 9 months. If the planning department approves a project, applicants must still complete several post-approval requirements. For example, applicants will need to comply with all conditions of approval that are placed on the project from other county departments, and applicants also must obtain grading or building permits as needed. Additionally, approved cannabis storefront retailers will need to obtain a county business license from the county executive office, as outlined earlier in tonight's presentation. So now we'll take a look at the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan area. This map identifies potential sites that retailer operations could be located. The green areas shown on the map are zone districts that allow cannabis storefront retailers. These include the commercial C1 and C2 zone districts, manufacturing, and mixed-use districts I described earlier in my presentation. It's really important to note that these areas only show zone districts where future cannabis storefront retail businesses could potentially be located. However, as previously described, any future operations or businesses would need to go through the appropriate county permit process and business license review before they're able to operate. Some of the areas here that you see are outlined in blue. Those are designated as sensitive receptors. These include schools, daycares, or youth centers, and they're surrounded by a red buffer, which is 750 feet from the property line of the sensitive receptor. These buffer areas show areas where no storefront retail can occur. So, for example, even though the green zones in this area could potentially allow these businesses, because of the sensitive receptor buffer, the applicant could not obtain permits or operate in this area. Finally, additional information and mapping resources can be found at the county's cannabis website, which is located at cannabis.countyofsb.org. Specifically, we want to point you in the direction of our interactive cannabis map, where you can explore more interactive version of the maps you see on your screen. So if I can get control of the share screen, thank you. So the cannabis.countyofsb.org web link will take you here. I think a lot of you are fairly familiar with this page and you've had to access this page to get here tonight. So clicking on the community engagement link will bring you down to the overview of tonight's meeting, as well as the other community meetings we've been holding the last couple weeks. Under helpful links here, there are two links: County of Santa Barbara Cannabis Permitting and Zoning Map, as well as a tip sheet for navigating this map. Clicking on this link, we will pull up the interactive mapping program. For tonight's meeting, as well as the other community meetings, we've created specific bookmarks that can help the community navigate to the community plans of their interest. On the top right corner, using this symbol here, the bookmark list will pop up. Looks like I'm having a bit of loading issues. Here we go. And for tonight's meeting, we'll look at the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan area. Clicking on this link will zoom folks into the Eastern Goleta Valley area. In addition to using this bookmark, this other figure here includes the layer list. For tonight's meeting, the layers that I have activated are the 750-foot buffer and parcels and zones allowing cannabis storefront retail, as well as sensitive receptors. So this map is very similar to what we were showing on screen. And zooming into this, I'm going to click on one of these parcels in the green area. So clicking on this area, it will give me the APN as well as the site address. Clicking on the more information will also bring up a link to Google Maps. For those of you familiar with Google Maps, this will show you a satellite view overhead. And once this loads, here we go. There's also the option of putting the little Google person down on the streets and being able to get a bit of a drive-by so folks can get a better idea of the surrounding location and get some more context to the neighborhood and surrounding uses of this area. I hope this map will be of use to those of you who are tuning into today's meeting and can be a helpful resource when looking at other areas of the county and cannabis permitting as well. With that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Malekian.
Thank you, Catherine. I always find that map presentation fascinating and informative, and I hope everybody else that's watching does as well. So now we're in the portion of this evening where we want to hear from you. We'd like to answer any questions that you have with respect to anything that you've heard tonight or anything that you've heard about cannabis retail issuance. We'd also like to hear your comments and general observations. And again, just as a reminder, we're not selecting sites tonight. We're not selecting vendors. This is really to help us gain a better understanding of what the concerns of the residents of the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan area are as we move forward in this process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gina DePinto, who probably will have another couple of points of explanation about how you can weigh in. Gina?
Thank you, Barney. I'm not quite sure why I have an echo. Can you hear me okay? So tonight in our question and answer window, so Barb, thank you. Our first question just came in. We'll go through these and answer written questions live. But just again, to assist everyone, for those who are listening to us by phone and probably not on computer with video or through the Zoom app, you can use *9 to raise your hand. It'll send us a little waved hand that we know to call on you. To mute or unmute your phone, once that happens, it's *6. Otherwise, again, we have the question and answer window. For those in Zoom, there is in the menu bar for you, it says raise your hand. I don't have the same menu that you are, so I always forget where to tell folks to find it, but it generally is usually at in your participants window. And with that, I think, Barney, why don't you go ahead and take the question? And Barb has also raised her hand to speak. So.
Thank you, Gina. This question, can you explain why Montecito is exempt from having a resale store? They are part of the county. This question has come up at each of the community plan area meetings, and Catherine has ably answered it at every one of the community plan area meetings. So, Catherine.
So the Montecito area has certain types of zoning. As I went over in my presentation, cannabis is permitted within certain zone districts in that Montecito area. They don't have, with the exception of, I believe, one parcel, they don't have the C1 or C2 zoning or any of the manufacturing or mixed use zoning that would allow for cannabis storefront retailers to be located. In addition, I believe Chapter 50 identifies 6 community plan areas for storefront retail locations to be located, and the Montecito community plan area was not one of those called out.
And
Thanks,
Catherine, you also mentioned Coast Village Road is generally the city of Santa Barbara.
That's correct. Thank you, Gina. The majority of Coast Village Road that has that commercial zoning and that folks continually ask about is within the city, with the exception of, I believe, that one parcel that I had mentioned.
And if I'm not mistaken, that one parcel is actually the back portion of a parking lot.
So
Gina, you said Barbara had a comment?
She lowered her hand, so I think she was just going to ask the question. So this is a shy group from the first 4 meetings. We have no other questions or comments in the queue, and we have received many in writing, and everything is going into the record, but there are no raised hands. And so I'm never sure if folks are having a hard time finding the queue in the future to raise their hand. And if you are, you can certainly submit Q&A as well.
Gina, why don't, if we're just so I don't want to end this too early and cut somebody off.
Right.
So why don't you one more time go through the different ways that people can weigh in or ask questions after this process is over?
Sure. I think, Reese, if you forward a slide after Q, there you go. So we are still accepting, of course, comments, questions, many ways. So you can either send us an email or a letter to cannabisinfo@countyofsb.org. You can leave a message at 805-568-2057. On the web page at the cannabis, the website that Catherine actually showed you, in those helpful links, and I don't believe it's in the presentation slide. Catherine actually brought that up live on the internet, but there is a survey that you can still complete and send and include. There's a question about ranking concerns. You can submit comments there, and we're still collecting those and adding those to the record. And then after each meeting, we are posting a video of each meeting, which is also located on the same website. And we technically have probably 100 questions. And so it's just taking us a little time to take all the input and put it into an FAQ that will be helpful for everyone, which will also be on the website. And generally, except for maybe the phone numbers, which will have your phone number, everyone who comes in through Zoom, we have an email address, and we will follow up with everyone who attended the meetings to let you know when that FAQ is posted, as well as next steps to follow the process. So with that, Barb has raised her hand. Barb, I'm going to give you the signal to unmute. And
Okay,
you are open.
Okay, thanks for having this meeting. And so I have two questions. So you're saying that even though Montecito has a community plan, that there's no place that they could have a retail store?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's just because they never zoned for retail?
I'm always reluctant to answer specific zoning questions, so I'll let
Okay.
Catherine do it.
So Montecito doesn't have the zoning that cannabis retailers are able to be located in, aside from one parcel. That parcel is currently used as parking. Additionally, the Montecito Land Use and Development Code does not have any provisions for permitting cannabis. So
Okay.
since there is no cannabis called out and no pathways to permit cannabis, it's not allowed in
Okay.
Montecito area.
Thank you for that. I was really involved in developing our community plan. And so what I recall is that in mixed use, because it is considered, partially residential, like, is that an acceptable place to put a cannabis retail store?
So
Because
for
I
those,
thought that anyway, I thought that was kind of a done deal, that it wasn't going to be able to be located near in mixed use because of the residential zoning.
there are certain mixed-use zones that have been identified as potential locations for the storefront retailers. The mixed-use zones require conditional use permits, which are discretionary permits. They'll be going before a decision maker, and those are the permits where we have to make those additional findings of neighborhood compatibility. In addition to that, the CEO's office will be doing a neighborhood compatibility review as well. So while there may be zone districts that the storefront retailers could potentially be located, it does not automatically mean that they will be able to operate in those areas.
And so, Catherine, do you know who's going to be like on I don't know, is it a committee, or who's going to decide about the compatibility situation?
So there's a neighborhood, there are two score sheets that are used in this process that Stephen described. One is a business application process, which is fairly technical in nature. And the other is the neighborhood compatibility score sheet, which we can put up a slide to show you. And it will be reviewed by two members of senior county staff, as well as a third-party vendor that we're going to contract with. We're in the process of procuring that contract now. This company has done a lot of these reviews under similar circumstances.
Reese, can you go to that slide while Barney's talking? Thank you.
The feedback, and if you look at this, the score sheet, one of the things that the board will do on the 18th of August, if right now the current draft score sheet that will be presented has these 5 areas with a percentage point, and the neighborhood compatibility portion is currently 30%. Now, that weighting will be changed or approved on August the 18th. The input from tonight, the input from the comments, the input from questions, a review of all of the factors that are laid out there will go into the community portion of or the neighborhood compatibility portion of that score sheet.
Okay, thank you. So Barney, just.
And one more, because we do have some other people who want to ask a question.
Okay, so this will be my last comment. Just because, you know that the community has felt fairly, left out of the process. And I know that's a controversial issue, but it would be nice, I'm just going to say, if, there could be a community member or two that's part of that would, I think, make us feel like we were included. So I just want to give you that input if that's a possibility.
It's not currently spelled out in the ordinance, but we will definitely take a look at that and see if that's possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb.
There's a second question. Will there be a mandatory buffer zone between the city of Goleta and county cannabis businesses or retailers? And the answer to that is the only buffers are the 750-foot buffer around sensitive receptors. And I don't believe that simply the boundary line between the incorporated city and the county requires a buffer. To clarify, does currently having a cannabis business license in the county give a business priority over applicants who do not have a license? If so, why? I'll let Stephen talk a little bit about licenses, but the short answer is no. There are currently no cannabis retail licenses in the unincorporated areas of the county. I believe there are 3 in Santa Barbara City, but no, they would not certainly have them priority. But Stephen, maybe you want to expand on that a little bit.
Sure. So thank you for your question, Liz. So as part of the license review process by the licensing team, that doesn't provide the applicant any advantage. However, I think we would entertain this kind of input as part of the criteria for the neighborhood compatibility plan.
Gina, do we have any other questions in the queue?
We have no questions in the queue and no hands raised to speak or ask or make a comment. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Liz. So again, I'll direct you to the contact sources that are in front of you. Please feel free to reach out to any one of us or reach out indirectly through these links. Our commitment is twofold. One is that every comment or question that we have to answer will be included in the process for each community plan area and what that area's concerns were. That will be a portion of the report on August the 18th. And our website will be continually updated as we move through this process. And as when we get to the place where we're actually preparing to open the application period, as I mentioned earlier, The ordinance requires that we give a minimum of 30 days notice before that application period formally opens. So everybody will be well aware that that process is underway. And with that, I want to wish you a good evening. Wish you all and your families to be safe, and we will talk again soon. And you have our contact information up in front of you. Take care, everyone.